Directors for the Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship, and welcome to Positive Links. It's a series put together by our center. For those of you who are not familiar with our center, we talk about ourselves lots of different ways, but the sentence I'm going to use today is our center is dedicated to contributing to the understanding of how organizations can be positive forces in society, as well as in the lives of teams, leaders, and employees. Beyond generating knowledge about what we call positive deviance in and of organizations, we're passionate about trying to explore new ways to bring this knowledge to practice. We do this through a broad array of electives at Ross. In fact, we have the broadest and deepest array of MBA electives with POS on the inside of any business school in the world. So we do it through electives as well as through books, articles, cases, and tools. Positive Links, however, is also a really important way through which we try to engage knowledge conversations coming from research on positive organizational scholarship. This series has been generously funded by Paul Jones. Do you want to stand up? We'll just do another thank you. Paul's been an enduring supporter of the center, but in particular of this series, and we're deeply appreciative of that. This year, we are actually in session 4 of a year-and-a-half-long session series on generative practices, how to be a positive force in troubled times. This series was arranged by Bob Quinn, who's going to speak today, as a way for the center to engage important ideas about how even in the darkest of times or in the most challenging conditions, people and institutions can thrive. Each of our sessions, and the previous ones are viewable off our website if you missed them, has addressed this important topic in different ways. Each of the sessions has at its core the idea of generative. Now, the word generative suggests the ability to originate or to produce something. Generative practices are behaviors that reverse the process of decay. In difficult times, there are ways of feeling, and doing that begin to elevate oneself and to elevate others. Thus, the context of decay and decline sometimes becomes the seedbed of the positive. And we think that's something really important to explore. So after Bob's session today, which we're really excited about, and I'll introduce him in a minute, there's 2 more sessions, one on March 14th, this year. There's actually going to be next fall as well. On March 14th, Ryan Quinn, who is related to Bob, one of his wonderful sons, is going to be here talking about achieving the extraordinary with moral conversations. And it's going to focus on the possibilities inherent in conversations to make our organizational experiences extraordinary. Then, on April 11th, we're privileged to have 2 of our own, Sue Ashford and Scott DeRue, who are both top leadership scholars, talk to us about how to build leaders as an asset in troubled times. So that gives you kind of a sense of the center, a little bit sense of this, the broader series that we're trying to bring to you. And now it's my privilege to introduce my wonderful colleague, Bob Quinn, who's been making change happen everywhere he goes for as long as I've known him. Bob's the Margaret Elliott Tracy Collegiate Professor in Business Administration, but he's way more than that. He's a man who uses his essence to light fires inside others so they can change the world. I've seen him do this a million ways. For example, when he leans in a meeting and asks that arresting question, or when he tells you a story that ends up living with you and guiding you for many years. His way of being sparks change in me and in people around me in ways both big and small. Bob truly is a transformational leader and a wonderful man of integrity. I consider it an honor that he's my colleague. We are in for a treat today. I have not seen Bob this fired up in a really long time, and we've been colleagues for 20 years. He's going to talk to us today about an invitation to excellence, positive organizing, and the generative practices of extraordinary people. So please help me welcome Bob.
Thank you. I'm very appreciative of that introduction. The last time Jane introduced me was at a national meeting of scholars. And she stood up and she said, Bob Quinn became our department chair and 5 women got pregnant. And she went on to a different topic. And this entire audience was sitting there frozen. And so I had to stand up and say, I assure you there was no causal linkage between the 2 events that Jane described. So I'm really appreciative of today's introduction. It's much easier to start this time. I'd like to start by telling you a story that provides a metaphor that I'd like you to tuck in the back of your head as we move forward. I had a friend who ran an office here at the university. It was intellectual property. He left here to be the CEO of a pharmaceutical startup on the West Coast. That company was based on some biological research. Basically, the way he explains it to me is your body is full of bacteria. They don't bother you in the least. You don't bother them, they don't bother you. He said, but every now and then what happens is one of those gets excited, lights up. And another one of them lights up. When that happens, they start to communicate. And they know there's 2. And then another one lights up. And then there's a critical moment where they communicate to each other that they've reached the tipping point, that they've reached a critical mass. At that moment, they take on a collective capacity and they begin to eat away at your body. This company was based on the notion of discovering how to cut off the communication, not kill the organism, but to cut off the communication between them. Now that's the background metaphor. Kind of crazy, right? Hold that in your head. Let's see where we go today. Take a look at this picture. Looks pretty familiar. Much of that picture is a statistical concept. What's the line, the vertical line running up and down in the middle? The mean, okay? We all know that. Another word for mean is the average. There's some non-statistical notions up there. There's 6 arrows that are totally non-statistical. What do you think those might mean? Okay, fantastic. There's forces. They're pushing things towards that mean. That's sociology. From the moment I took my first class, every paper I had to write, every test I had to write these words. Macro determines micro. All right? Structure determines process. Sort of the starting point. Those arrows are all those structures that determine what people do and push them in this place of stability. The first introductory class I took in sociology was called Social Organization. Why there's order in society. And we studied about norms and values and institutions. And it said there are these forces that cause predictable patterns in this order in society. If you were glutton for punishment and took Sociology 102, the name of that course in my day was Social Deviance. And we studied prostitution and mafia and all the pathologies. I was talking to one of our sociologists on campus here that I know very well, and I said, I'm interested in positive deviance. He got quite energized, not in a positive way. And he said, there is no such thing. By definition, deviance is negative. And he's right. In sociology, by definition, deviance is negative. There is no Sociology 103. Right? We covered 2 parts of that curve up there. There's a part that's uncovered. And there is no Sociology 103. There's nothing about positive deviance or excellence. Now I'm not picking on sociology. Substitute any social science in there, and it works. So, at the Center for POS, we don't look much, we don't discount it, we still take it as a reality, but we don't look at the middle of the curve. We look at topics and problems and issues, and we look at them at the other end of the curve and say, what is it, this thing like, whatever it is, decision-making, leadership, organization, what's it like when it's at its very best. And what do we learn from that? Turns out that that's a revolutionary question to ask. And for 10 years now, we've been asking that question, and there's a lot of data that's come back. Well, we talk about two lenses. Read that list very quickly. What is that list? Those are our starting points. After 10,000 studies across the social, probably more than that, across the social sciences, this is what we know to be true. This is what it's like. Now, here's another list. People sacrifice for the common good. They show compassion and respect. They make spontaneous contributions. They experiment. They get feedback. They learn. They expand roles and craft jobs. They take charge. They express voice. They become generative. They envision possibilities. They expand the resource pool. They build social networks. They live in high-quality connections. What is this list? It is a fabulous list, that's true. And some people say, that is apple pie. You know, that's Pollyanna. And what they're saying is, this is the reality I know. This is real. Now the question is, which list is real? Yeah, someone says, well, both of them are. They're both real. That is, this list comes from analysis and data. The one list is as real as the other. But the one list is very normal. The other one is not so normal. Happens, but not so normal. Now, I go into organizations, and I've been doing it for 30 years. I've been in every kind of organization imaginable. And I wrote a book called Deep Change or Slow Death. Most organizations are moving towards slow death. That is, the second law of thermodynamics holds for organizations. Unless work is done to the contrary, a system starts to close down, loses energy, decays, and begins to die. That's an engineering concept. I believe that holds for our organizations. We have a sign on the building, we have a legal system, we have people in the building, but we don't necessarily have an organization in the building. In contrast, I think this list is about something called flourishing. The trajectory is not downward, it's upward. And there's another word that comes to mind that has to do with moving people from the one list to the other. And this is the word. When we use that word normally, we mean she's our president, he's our dean, he's our department chair. And we talk about someone in a position. When I use the word leadership, I don't mean that at all. I mean her and him and him and her, and they all have influence. And everybody's leading. The question is, how are you leading? What's the quality of your influence? And what kind of quality of influence moves people from there to there? And that's something that's very, very important to me. Now, this set of seminars we've been doing is about people showing generative practices, particularly when systems collapse. So in the city of Detroit, what's great? In Michigan, that's been so hard hit, what are people doing that's incredibly generative? At the University of Michigan, where are the pockets of generativity? Now, what's going on in the business school and the ed school and the law school? Or in any company, where is the generativity? Where's it happening? Even in the worst of times. And what can we learn from that? Well, today I want to talk about a group that do not see themselves as leaders. They're not highly valued by society. Their clients are often very uncooperative and often unqualified. Their context is hierarchical. Their context is deeply broken, shameful actually, bitterly shameful. Their context punishes excellence. and their context is public and politically charged. What I want to look at is school teachers. But not ordinary school teachers, not middle-of-the-curb school teachers. What I want to look at is teachers in the top 1%. Absolutely excellent school teachers. Extraordinary human beings. Now, I'll warn a couple of things to think about. Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book Outliers, and he had a chapter in there that caused a lot of discussion. He reviewed literature about the notion of 10,000 hours. And there's research from different areas that say there's something magic about 10,000 hours. If you're a pianist and you go to Juilliard and you practice for 9,000 hours, you're going to teach music in high school. But if you practice for 10,000 hours, you're going to be in Carnegie Hall. And it applies to all these different areas of activity. And it's quite stunning. It keeps popping up in different places, and he really popularized that. I have a question for you. In your life, what have you spent 10,000 hours practicing? What is your equivalency in your life of being a great Carnegie Hall concert pianist? There's an answer. Here it is. In fact, you spent, by the time you graduated from college, 16,400 hours doing that. Now, I want you to look closely at the picture. See the kid closest to us? You know, all the hair looks a little geeky. You know what he's thinking? He's thinking about his favorite baseball team. It's the 7th game of the World Series, and he's pitching his team to victory. And there's another kid just beyond him. You can see there with the yellow shirt. You know what he's thinking? I can't tell you because it's X-rated. The reason I know that is I was in the 11th grade. Now, think about it. 16,400 hours doing what? Sitting in front of ordinary teachers. Now, another word for average or mean is what? If we want to be a little less kind. Mediocre. So if I spent 16,000 hours learning how to be bored, to passively engage the world, watching mediocre human interaction, what are the implications of that? What does that say about what's been programmed in up here? And what would I naturally do if I suddenly stood in front of a group or held a conversation with somebody? And we could spend the whole time just talking about this one notion. I think it has incredible implications. Well, today we'll talk about excellent school teachers down there in the 3rd grade and the 1st grade. And we are going to talk about a place called Battelle for Kids. It's a little research shop in a terrible place. I have a hard time telling you where these people are located. But it's to the south of us by a few hours. I'll just say that. We have 2 amazing people here. This is Mary Peters. This is Mike Thomas. Would you guys just stand up? These 2 people know more than anybody else in the United States about something called value-added teachers. At Battelle, they do a great deal of work with value-added scores and value-added teachers. What that means is we now can measure, by measuring a kid where he was as he starts and where he is at the end of the year and doing some very complex analyses, we can give you a value-added score for a school teacher. This teacher moved her kids 1 year of progress in 1 year. And maybe it's in reading, maybe it's in for that group, it's average. So you're right in the middle of the curve. You're an average teacher. This one moved them 1.5 years or 2 years. This one moved them 3 years. Whoa, you're at the end of the curve. You're a value-added teacher. This one did 1/2 year. These 2 do a very interesting thing. There's all kinds of controversy about this. They're not involved in any of that. They're not interested in that. They're interested in talking to these teachers. And more accurately, getting these teachers to talk to each other. Because they want to learn what these teachers are about, and they want to nurture an environment where they flower. They want to spread excellence. So you want to know about that, come see them at the end. These are two amazing people. There are three other amazing people here. Kate, where are you? Kate and Jeff, somewhere around here, Jeff, and Gretchen's here. Where are you? Okay. Three marvelous colleagues that have been working with me on this project, and I'm very indebted to the things that they've helped me with. So I got a call from Mike. 4 years of working with these value-added teachers, looking at their practices. What do they do? And he said, the reason I'm calling you is what they do, their practices fit your model. And what he's talking about is something that we developed in the 1980s, and Tim and others have worked on a lot, that's called the competing values model. And the very simple version of it is that there's 4 ways of organizing. The first is you can organize in a hierarchy. And everyone here immediately knows what that means. Because in 3 years old on the playground, you'd say, "Oh, let's play a game. I'll be the mother." Not the kid, the mother. I'll be the teacher. I'll be the boss. From the time we're little, we understand hierarchy. A second way to organize is a market. Not marketing, but a market. I always think of the image in the movies of 50 stockbrokers in a room, right? And they're on the phone. And at the end of the day, the one that's successful is the one that sells the most. And they say, "Oh, and they gave me a key to lock my desk. Because if you leave at lunch and don't you lock your desk, your colleague steals your clients." And no one bats an eye because this is a market. You know, it's totally competitive. Well, another way to organize is to be a clan. This is very team-oriented. And the fourth way to organize is something we call an adhocracy. It's high on the blue, very productive. It's high on the yellow, but it's the opposite of the red. And so you have groups of people engaging uncertainty and learning and creating. And that's a very hard one for us to get our minds around. It's going to have a lot to do with what we talk about today. Well, Mike said, you know, there are some school teachers, and they're all about being classroom-centered. It's about discipline and order. And some school teachers, well, they're achievement-centered. They're all about goals and moving forward. And some are student-centered. There's about respect and collaboration. And there's others who are about growth-centered. They're about potential and growth. And he said, you know, and their practices fit so cleanly into these 4 quadrants. And they've got hundreds of practices they've identified. But then Mike said something else that was interesting. He said, you know, the thing that most interests me is the practices that cross the quadrants, the cross-category things. I said, well, tell me more, Mike. And he gets fuzzy. You know, Mike's clearness suddenly disappears, and he's talking about these cross things. But I know exactly what he's talking about. Because for the last 30 years, I've used this model to focus not on differentiating people into the quadrants, but asking the question, what does it mean to integrate differentiation? And we know from research that great things happen when differentiation is integrated. For example, one person studied great creative contributions, Nobel Prize-winning stuff, major prizes in music, literature, art. And his conclusion was at the beginning of every major breakthrough is a Janusian insight. Janus is the god you can see 2 ways at the same time, where you integrate 2 opposite notions. Einstein, the happiest thought of my life was when I conceived of motion and rest as a simultaneous phenomenon. From that insight comes the law of relativity. And so on across every field. Integrating differentiation. That's so hard for me because I've been trained to differentiate things into clean categories. But we've thought a lot about that. And so we started talking a little bit. They had video footage of these teachers talking about their practices. I spent hours looking at those teachers talking about that and listing the practices and confirming that Mike was absolutely right. They fit very well. But I said, the first thing I said to them is, it's an incomplete picture. You see, because in business we ask the same thing. This guy's this is Jack Welch. Huh? He made all that money. What did he do? What were the practices? See, because if I can imitate Jack, I'll make money too. The whole leadership industry sort of based on that assumption. Well, it's not about practices. Practice is part of it, but it's not the center. And I said, look, I want to do some interviews. I want you to get me not value-added teachers. I want you to get me the very best value-added teachers. I want the great ones, the ones from the top 1%. See, because some of them, they get just barely into the value-added category. And next year they may fall barely out of it and get back. Those are good teachers. But I want to talk to the great ones. Get me a few good ones, but get me the great ones. Because we're going to find something very different when we talk to them. And I said that with some confidence. And they had enough experience that they were also confident about that. So we talked to people. They were older. They were female, primarily. All these, there's an exception or two. They were white. They had master's degrees. They were experienced. And 5 of them were good teachers, value-added teachers. 7 of them were excellent value-added teachers. They were in that top 1%. Now, you don't get up and talk about, make a presentation based on that kind of sample, 12 people. How would I even dare do that? Well, there's an answer to that. This is the richest data I have ever collected. We had 5 observer note-takers in that room, and during these interviews, it was not uncommon for one of them to get up and leave and go in the hallway. Come back after the interview, eyes all red, saying, I couldn't stay in the room. During those 2 days of interviews, I had tears in my eyes much of the time. What they said was incredible and fit exactly what these 2 said would happen. That the great ones don't talk like the others. They say things that are quite strange. But it's shocking that they say the same thing. So they're very unique, but what they say agrees with each other. So we're in the very first stages of a study. We're just beginning to formulate hypotheses. This is what I'm giving you today, is a bunch of formulated hypotheses. We have more interviewing to do. In a week or 2, we're going to do some interventions and workshops. We're going to do a survey of 3,400 people across the range of outcome. We have a lot more we'll learn. But I think what we've just barely started to find is so exciting that it will affect you. But I have a warning, a major warning for you. This presentation is not about teaching. 2, it's about adaptive work. 3, it's about you becoming a more effective version of yourself. This is a very dangerous presentation for you to be attending. All right, you've been warned. You could leave now if you want. All right. At the end of this session, we've got some pieces of paper there on the table for you. I'd encourage you to grab one of those. Any thought, any feeling you have, create a mind map, you know. Make it messy. Why did he define it like that, you know? Is that conclusion sound? The example's misleading. I remember when Miss Jones told me in the 3rd grade. Whatever pops in your head, make a mind map. Just before you leave, I'm going to ask you to give me a gift. I want you to star the 3 or 4 most important things on your messy mind map and then write me a paragraph or 2 to make me better. What you have to think, what you think and feel really matters. The first time I've ever presented this stuff, the stuff I can't even think about. Help me. 2, we're going to stop at 1 o'clock sharp. You can out the door. But those of you who want to stay, we're going to have a round table. The round table is going to be a little unusual. We're going to try to create what we're talking about. I think you'll have an interesting experience if you participate. Okay, key question. If we said, end this thing right now, what's the answer to the key question? The key question is, what's the difference between good teaching or great teaching? The short answer? Great teachers engage in positive organizing. Just think about it. Every September, you get 30, 40 new kids. And what do? You organize them into a class. You create a culture. You have an objective. That's not the way they normally think about it. They get in 30 years, they get 30 chances. Businessmen don't get that. It's kind of an intriguing thing. Exercise. Let's see if we can find out what this really means. I could talk to you all day and it wouldn't make much sense. So here's an exercise. I'm going to give you 4 statements from these excellent teachers. We'll read statement 1, and then we'll read statement 2, and your task is to say, what's the same across those 2 quotes? Then I'll read 3, what's the same? Then I'll read 4. And then I'm going to say, go. And without thinking, your job is to turn to the person next to you, and in 1 sentence, tell her what positive organizing is. You ready for this? You up for it? All right, you better go to work. All right, here's the first quote. I send my class into amazing discussions. In them I learn new things. They get into a zone. I try to set my class on fire. It's based on excitement for me. I'm contagious. It transforms their work into a puzzle they want to solve. They want to do it even if there's no grade. It's about internal motivation. That was not Miss Jones that I went to the 3rd grade with. I'll tell you that. 2, the students understand the flow, where we're going. It's a guided conversation. The kids take ownership of it. They all take the right roles, and the class moves seamlessly. It's a certain point the kids can function without me. It's then that they love school. Everything becomes fun and easy. 3rd one. Now remember, what's the same? 3rd one. I'm moving and they're fully engaged. No one's wasting time. There's a wide excitement and it is self-sustaining. They're proud of what they're doing and it's important to me. The adrenaline's flowing. They realize they can get excited about learning. I'm unconsciously competent about it. You have to decide what to do in the moment. The answers happen on the fly. Okay, what's the same? Number 4, getting close to you, putting you on the spot here. I ask questions of the right students and they make comments. The others piggyback on and give their opinions. They begin learning from each other. This kind of teaching requires self-confidence. You have to try new things. It comes from self-reflection. You cannot be a follower. Go. You got 60 seconds. Tell the person next to you, what is positive organizing? Let's see what you came up with. All right, who had a brilliant neighbor that told you something you were really impressed by? Someone give us an answer. There's one. Tell us what he said. No, I don't want to hear from him. I want to hear from you. What did he say?
Like about the teachers that are empowering the students, being empowered to empower the students to learn and get engaged in the content.
Okay, so I'm hearing we've got a teacher that's empowered and empowering and engagement. Those are the words I'm hearing so far. Good. Who's going to build on that? Yes, Janet. Well, I don't understand a lot of sexy stuff. What are you talking about? So engagement is enormously positive, and those of us who know the flow concept would say, well, that seems to be coming into play here. What else? Yeah.
Excitement.
Boy, there's a lot of energy. Yeah. Yes?
The students are self-motivated.
Something's happened. These are not the, they must have the very best students. That's the only way you could explain this. Okay? Yeah.
Two-way energy.
The energy's going 2 ways. The bacteria dancing here, right? Those communication channels are full. I'm a catalyst. I'm an empowered catalyst. And then a strange word. They're leading by example. What does that mean?
They start off with positive energy and that's what they pass on.
This positive energy is very important. This feeling. Ooh, that's strange. The feeling's important, and they pass it on. I like that. Whoa, the teacher's not in the center. Of course they're in the center. Why do you say that?
They got the whole thing going, and then it ran without.
It runs without me. You know, that violates everything I know about organization.
The students are teaching each other. They're learning from each other.
The students? The teacher's just a facilitator. We're getting more and more radical here. Anybody else? Fritz.
It's not about the individuals. It's about the energy where they're going.
It's not about the individuals. It's about the energy, the whole. It's about what the bacteria are doing when they're together. Okay, good.
It's enough structure that it ignites and then it generates new structure.
There's enough structure that it ignites, and then there's new structure. Do you know that you would flunk sociology? You would have never made it. Yes, ma'am.
It feels like there's a certain chaos going on.
Whoa. There's a certain chaos going on.
A good chaos.
A good chaos. Okay, we're really talking funny. One more.
It's non-judgmental and it's fun.
It's non-judgmental and it's fun. Is Lance here? Too bad. He'd be very excited about that answer, right? Okay. Here's an image of an organization. It looks very familiar. Now here's the kinds of things that we just heard these teachers say. It's a conversation of full engagement. There's urgency in the process. Experimentation, spontaneity, improvisation is going on. Energy, excitement, emotional contagion, passion is there. It's intrinsic motivation. There's fun and love. The process is self-organizing. It flows seamlessly. There's shared leadership. There's this flow concept. I spend a lot of time with senior executives over here in the executive education facility. I get up there and I say, now here's a case study about self-organization and shared leadership. And they say, yeah, we got that. And I say, now here's a little video clip. And yeah. See, and I know they don't have the slightest idea what I'm talking about. So I say, well, let's try something different. And I put blindfolds on them. And I give them this little complex task to do. And they're terrified because all of a sudden the hierarchy just died. And even though they're from different places, see, there's always a hierarchy. It just died. And then they begin doing things. And they go out and they do this task. They accomplish the task. It's a miracle. They come back. They're so excited. I say, what did you do? They say, well, we organized, we planned, we made him the leader. And when they finish telling the story, I say, you know, that's a complete lie. Yeah, you made him a leader, and as soon as you got up from the table, no one was listening to him ever again. But he said, oh, I know what the door is. And she said, oh, I found something. So I think I can make sense of that. Now, she's leading. Who appointed her? Oh, we don't know. No one appointed her. See, and then we take it apart and rebuild it, and their eyes start to open. They get this excitement. At the end of the week, they've spent 5 days, 8 hours, and they say, the highlight of the week was that exercise. They just discovered something that's all around them all the time that they can't see. See, and that's not about executives. That's about the people in this room, starting with me. Well, the experience alters assumptions, identities change, understanding capacity amplified, even the teacher learns. Isn't that interesting? That's what they're doing. See? There's one kind of organization, then there's another. That's a fully engaged group. It's fully engaged in two ways. One, the people are fully engaged. Everybody is participating. And it doesn't look like that other diagram. Now, it turns out that if you do that, positive organizing, you know what it produces? It produces that. The learning produces a hierarchy. The hierarchy will function until human beings screw it up while they blame everything else, and then the hierarchy starts to disintegrate, and it either dies through slow death, or it gets reinvented by the emergence of positive organizing. They're constant yin and yang. When this happens, the hierarchy does not disappear, it goes latent. The teacher's still in the room. Any moment she can stand up and say, I'm the teacher. But it goes latent when this other system emerges. And so these executives say, oh, we were so good, and they tell this hierarchical story. That's not what they did. But they're so programmed by their 16,400 plus hours, they can't see what they just saw until somebody helps them. Well, that's about bacteria. That's about an emergent system. When you change the quality of this person and you change the quality of the interaction between them, we get emergent processes. Micro determines macro. Sociology's upside down. And it happens all the time. Now, go back and think about those two lists. If we took the descriptions of these teachers, which list would we put them in? Pretty clear, right? Those teachers are leading. They're energizing the network. Now, let's talk about some specific findings. We're going to break them into two categories. One is, what do these teachers do to themselves? How do they lead themselves? How do they change the quality of who they are? How do they make themselves into more effective versions of themselves? You see, when you get to practices, oh, I keep this kind of role, or I greet them in this way in the classroom. It's important, but it's missing some incredibly important things we never look at. So how do they lead themselves? Well, we get some interesting findings. And I'm going to talk to you about integrating differentiation. In this case, this first part, about integrating the self with other things. And the first thing is the integration of self and profession so that it becomes a synergy. Normal assumption, teaching is a job. You give me money, I show up in the morning. It's a job. Here's what they say. Teaching's my life calling. It is who I am. It's my destiny. It is my identity. As a girl in the summer, I used to hold 2-hour sessions for younger kids, and their parents loved it. I'd become a teacher. Another one says, I used to line up my rag dolls and teach them for hours. They're doing what they love. They don't have a job. They transform the job into a calling. Doing the work expands the self. Expanding the self enriches the work. They're living in a synergy. They don't have a job. Self and the objective, the goal. What's the specific objective? Normal assumption, the objective is to instill knowledge. My job, see, I'm standing up here. This is powerful. I'm the professor. I'm going to drill a hole in her head and pour knowledge in. She's going to take a test, and I'm going to stamp her head. Graduate. That's what education is, isn't it? So it's about knowledge and information. To my kids, math does not matter because life overwhelms them. And they do not believe they could change. See, these are teachers that have very wide-ranging groups of students. They don't have the greatest students in the world. And many of them come from homes that are very troubled. And they're very broken. So they don't care about math. They don't want to be here. Because they don't believe they can change. I think of the nurses that gave a seminar years ago here talking about studying prostitutes in Detroit. And they were shocked at what they discovered about the behaviors. And they talked about the risks they were taking. And these people said, well, we're going to be dead by the time we're 24 anyway. And the nurses were just stunned. Well, if I believe life is hopeless and I can't change, there's a woman in California who's done incredible research the last few years about that notion. Large number of us don't believe we can change. Well, if you don't believe you can change, does that orient how you relate to other people? What you expect of them? My kids don't believe they can change. I don't feel like anything I teach kids in math or science is going to matter to them if they can't function in society. Get along with other people, be good citizens, and have a good work ethic. The challenge is to bring hope, to help the students see how they can take control of their lives and change their own situation. Well, wait a minute, they're in this terrible home situation. How do you expect a kid in the 3rd grade to do that? EVAs transform the objective to development of a new identity and the realization of adaptive capacity. My job is not to put information in their head. My job is to transform how they see themselves. My job is for them to be reborn, to take a new identity. That's very different than putting the textbook in his head. See, at the bottom of that iceberg is identity, values, similar kinds of things. At the top of that iceberg, above the waterline, is knowledge, logic, integration of self and values. Normal assumption, people seek to be externally validated. They live in fear. What's he thinking of me? If I present this, what would the boss say? A lot of what I do and who I am has nothing to do with education and math. It has to do with the values I hold. What I really teach is who I am. I'm not their friend. I do not go down to their level. I'm not their buddy who conforms to their wishes. I'm not worried about what they think of me. Now you've got to put this in context. We're sitting here interviewing these teachers with tears in our eyes because they're talking about their kids with a level of love that those kids are probably not even getting at home. They adore these kids. And they're saying, I don't care what he thinks of me. I'm not here to go down to his level. I'm here to pull him up. We were just talking about this just before the meeting. These people are incredibly demanding. They pull you right to the edge of your ability. Enormously high on task. And enormously high on love. Oh, he cuddled right in there. I like that guy. Every study that we've ever done on transformational leadership in the last how many years has been done, it always comes back the same. High on task, high on person. Integration of two opposites. At least the way our logic sets up the opposites. This kind of teaching requires confidence. You have to try new things. It comes from self-reflection. You cannot be a follower. Now, do you see how strong that is? It's all about inner directedness, not responding to fears. They transform the process of external validation. They're intrinsically directed and highly authentic. They live in their values. Consciousness expands. Values become still more salient. They become more value-driven. Highly authentic. How many have seen The King's Speech? Great movie. Got a prince that stutters. It's a big deal. Has lots of implications. So we take all the resources of the British Empire to fix it. King has a solution. Beat the kid down. Brother has a solution. Work him over some more. I can't even talk about this guy. He's the professor from Cambridge, right? Who's got this, oh man. And he's totally incompetent. And so is everybody else in the movie except one guy who doesn't have a PhD, who was an actor in Australia. And people came back from World War I, and they said they're all stuttering. Help him. And so he doesn't know what he's doing, but he learns to help him. And he meets the prince. They make an introduction. And he has rules. The prince is driven crazy by the rules. Number one, no hierarchy. Insists on calling the prince Bertie, which is only the family can call him. Authenticity. Everybody else is posturing around that royal hierarchy. This guy refuses to engage it. He will only deal with reality. See, hierarchy is almost always based on the past. And this kind of change happens in the present moment. You go back and look at that movie again and see if it doesn't fit everything I tell you today. The integration of self and positivity. Normal assumption. Emotional reactions happen. Something bad happens, I feel bad. That's nature. They tell me emotions are contagious. They say this in so many different ways. If I have a bad day, I do not let it show. I choose to be excited and happy. Now, every time they said it, and every one of them said this in one fashion or another, I said, "Oh, so you're a hypocrite." And they go like this. They say, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you're sad, you pretend to be happy." And then they look at me and they kind of shake their head and say, "You poor dumb professor. Look." And then they talk about it. And they say other things like, "I have to make myself into something higher. It's my job to always be positive. I self-regulate and I stay positive." They transform negative feelings into heartfelt positivity through self-regulation. Now, I want you to think about Academy Awards. Why do we give some actor an Academy Award? Because as they take that particular role, they take that role with such authenticity that we're blown away by it. George Scott becomes Patton. These people see themselves as a positive force in the world. The aberration is feeling bad. Yeah, it happens to me. Yeah, it's natural. I choose to self-regulate and not live in negative feelings. They discovered Barbara Fredrickson while never reading Barbara Fredrickson. See, Barbara Fredrickson's the woman who made these incredible discoveries about the positivity ratio. Most of the people in this room live at a ratio of 2 to 1. 2 positives for every negative. You raise it to 4 to 1, and your life will totally change. Study after study that she's done. Incredible stuff. They discovered it, but they never read her. How'd they do that? The integration of self and change. Normal assumption. Individuals prefer the status quo. People will resist change. I expect to reach every child. The self-efficacy in these people is incredible. I reach them all. One of them said, I go to the principal and I say, "Give me the worst students." I said, "You say what?" They said, "Oh, I go." And I said, "Well, why do you do that?" Well, you see, these kids, again, they're broken. If they don't get me, they don't have any chance in life. Because I'm going to reach them all. So if they get me, they got a chance. So I want the worst ones. I get them all. They all say that. Doesn't that sound like hubris? Sure does. Why did I have tears in my eyes? Because there was no hubris at all. These people are sitting there, little tiny petite woman, who fills the room with power. No hubris at all. Absolutely authentic. Able to talk about her strengths and her weaknesses comfortably. I expect to reach every child. Well, if you expect that, it's about pushing forward until you figure it out. They take complete accountability for him. If he's not there, it's not his fault. It's my fault. I'm not teaching well enough. Total accountability. We had an executive that we worked with, took them through some things that we do related to this kind of stuff. And one of the changes is he said, I used to see resistors and try to kill them. He says, now I only see people of potential. I don't see resistors anymore. So if I only see people of potential, and I'm trying to make this change, we've told him he's still not doing it, an amazing transformation happens. You see, under the old model, there's resistors. That's his problem. We get to kill him. Where's the hammer? We'll bang him. If there's only people of potential, whoa, it's not his fault. I have not related to him in a fashion that he sees the vision in a meaningful, relevant way and desires to change. I need to get... You see the transformation? That's not normal. That's non-natural. It's my accountability. So, I have to be learning all the time. Every act I take as a teacher, I have to be evaluating it and getting better. And there's never a moment I don't think about that. So I've got this man, and he's talking about his lesson on the food chain. And he just went out and bought 5 rubber animals so he could teach the food chain. He gets all the way up to number 5. It's the shark. But he doesn't know that in the shark there's a squeaker. And he's making this point to come to the end, and he accidentally squeezes the squeaker, and the kids go berserk, and the lesson's ruined. And then he talks about jogging that night. How can I transform that? How can I use that to get better? And so he comes back in a few days later and has the Mr. Miyagi ceremony. You see, when you complete this and you do this, you get to come up front here. And you get to squeeze my shark. And the kids are all excited, and the 6th graders are now saying in the schoolyard, Mr. So-and-so, can we squeeze the shark next year? Well, you got to do this first. Oh, we'll do it. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? But then he says, that wasn't good enough. I kept thinking about it, and I started expanding the ceremony. And I'd get them in there, and then I'd shake their hand. And I thought, well, I could do that too. He says, now, they do all the squeezing, they go through the whole process. I shake their hand, and I release them to the class. What's he talking about, right? Do you see what's going on inside him? He said, I want to teach you. And he points at me. He said, I want to teach you how to fly fish. The person on the video, he says, I want to teach you my new software program. I love teaching. And I want to get better every day. Push forward till you figure out, if I ever quit learning, I think I'm going to die. Example. In the middle of facilitating a lesson, this is the same guy. This is incredible. I'll tell you this in my own words. He's sitting there and he's describing this chaos in his class as all these fully engaged groups are going. And he's got them all going simultaneously. And he describes the joy of it. And then he says, I reach into my pocket and pull out my camera. I don't look through it. I just do this. Snap, snap, snap. I randomly snap pictures. Then I go home at night, and I lay them on the table and I study them. I say, why is he smiling? Why is she leaning a little? You know, what could I do to be better at this? And I'm sitting there, whoa. Do you see the hunger? They transform improvement into continuous improvement. They live in developmental readiness and adaptive confidence. In the literature on the development of leadership, and we say, you know, are they born or are they taught? We now know a lot more about that. Transformational leaders have life experiences, usually that they don't want to have. There's the divorce. There's the death. There's the, it's usually like that. And when they fight their way through it, they discover something about themselves. And this thing down here is not bad, it's good. And I can change. If I can change, and I'm so much better off, I have so much more power, he can change. Well, that first came to us in the 70s. Now we talk about trigger events in our lives that change that identity. And that if someone has a lot of that, they begin to develop developmental readiness. They're more oriented to it. Some people start to look for creating trigger events. And they live in adaptive confidence. They believe that they can go forward into uncertainty and learn in real time. That's enormously important, as opposed to conditional confidence. Keep me in my situation that I know how to do and I can learn. Don't put me in a situation that's uncomfortable. Self and other. Oh, this is stunning. Just stunning. Assumption. Recognizing the diversity of needs. See, I would go to the ed school and they give me the textbooks and they taught me how to be a teacher. I was in class 1 week and I discovered something. The students are all different. They have different needs. And if you want to be good, you've got to figure out her needs and her needs. You've got to pay attention to all those things and you've got to minister to them. If you're not working their needs, you're in trouble. Now, that's pretty powerful. That's empathy. And then these people say something stunning. I taught inner city kids. I taught special needs. I discovered they were all alike. They want someone to care and they want to succeed. You first learn that every kid's different. Then you learn that they're actually all the same. You develop a universal model. You can reach them all. I succeeded on the west side. They moved me to the east side. On the east side, they told me I would not succeed because the students were different. You have to understand, the students are all the same. Boy, wait a minute. School, they taught me the rules for all of them. Didn't work because they're all different. Got really good because I recognized the difference. Now you tell me they're all the same. What's going on? When I'm recognizing those differences, I'm having enormous empathy for who this person is. I can hear him, listen, feel him, know him. I love him. But if I do that with enough people over enough time, I can integrate that differentiation and create a universal theory of need. I spent several weeks preparing for today. I spent a lot more time in content than I usually do because I've never presented this content before. But I spent a lot of time preparing myself, not my content, me, around you. A lot of you I've never seen before. I have a universal theory of who you are and what you really need. And I never fail. See, they tell me when I work with some company, oh, you did that in the U.S., but when you go to our Asian people, you can't do that. I go to Asia, I do it. It always works. But I'm doing things they can't see. Integrate diversity of needs into a unified theory of action. It integrates the self and the other at a very high level. Someone said to me just a couple of weeks ago, that I think is here today, and she said, so-and-so's teaching undergraduates for the first time. They're having a real hard time. They don't talk. But they stumbled onto this one topic this one time about the coaches they had in high school, and they all lit up. See the bacteria? They all lit up, and that was the one day I had really good conversation. These teachers would never have that problem because they would be talking about the equivalent of the coaches every day because they'd be in the heads and the hearts of those undergraduates they never taught before. Self and the sacred. This was amazing. Normal assumption. Separation of the secular and the sacred. Got to do that in the public schools. I'd say, after they would describe how much they loved teaching and that they had a calling, I'd say, you know, calling is it kind of has a spiritual dimension to it. And then I'd say, you have a spiritual dimension in your life? Oh, they go like this. No one's ever said that to them before. And they just look at me, and I just look at them like this. And all of a sudden they say a few words, and then the dam breaks. And they start talking about their spiritual life. And every one of them comes from a different tradition. But their life is full of spiritual disciplines. And they say amazing things. I take my roster home and pray over the names of my students. If I was a complete atheist, and he said to me that he was a teacher and he goes home and he prays over the name of my kid be in his class. That tells me a whole lot. When I'm teaching, I pray for help. And they talked about all these kinds of things. Again, very touching, very unusual. They transform the secular into the sacred. How do they do that? They never talk about religion in class. But they sit here with this group and they transform the conversation from the middle of that curve to a place of authenticity and intimacy and exploration, and the space becomes sacred. Because there's an emergent system, and she becomes part of the whole, maybe for the first time in her life. And something happens to her. All right, so we got some contrasts. And I'm not going to go through them all. We've already been through them. But those are two very different lists. Let's go to the second category. What do they do in that classroom? Well, we got hundreds of things they do, but there's some that sort of stand out. They transform individualism. Normal teachers instruct individuals. It's about facilitating the learning process. Teaching becomes easy. This amazing African-American woman, she was so, when she talked, it was just such insight. And she said, the moment you discover this, it all changes. It becomes easy. I get multiple conversations going at once. I'm the quarterback. I have to see the whole field. I have to read all the signals. They're hard to see. I know when to go to one group because the tone is just a bit too loud. I look over at another group, I know they're fine. I'm watching the whole field. I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye. I'm always adjusting, always ready to call a new play. I'm looking for the right cues so I can keep the process going. That was my man with the shark. EVATs transform instruction into facilitation. Students experience surrender to the emergent whole. Transforming content, irrelevance to meaning. Normal assumption, content is sometimes mandated. The district says you have to teach this. Or there are various structures in place. It's about relevance in relationship. One of them said to me, the greatest sin you can commit is to be boring. For even 1 minute, that's an unacceptable sin. And I thought about this cathedral I live in, and the job talks that the PhD candidates give, and the sacredness of the God of rigor, and how interest is of no relevance in the process. I take the content and make it as much a part of me as I can. This is really important. I won't teach it unless I can make it part of me. In other words, I transform the content to my strengths. I teach from my strengths. I craft the job. When the district mandate goes against the best interests of the kids, I change the material. These are very empowered people who know their purpose. When I moved to the 7th grade, I thought it would be successful because of all my previous experiences, and I wasn't. I expected to be on the same page. I was expected to be on the same page on the same day as all the other teachers, and my whole teaching style had changed. This year, I didn't listen. My scores went back up. Refused to play because the social pressures were not as important as this kid's progress. They transform irrelevant content into meaningful content. Meaningful for them, meaningful for the student. The outcome is relevance and authentic communication. That was a little cartoon on the internet that was useful, but it turns out to be profound. Do you read the cartoon? What they're interested in is the one circle. What you want to say is the other. And in the middle of the Venn diagram is relevance. I love that little cartoon. What these teachers do is they make that Venn diagram look like this. They only want to say what's relevant. Transforming hierarchy, control into attraction. Normal assumption, hierarchical control is necessary. Many of them talk about their techniques for setting expectations, for getting the procedures and processes in place so the kid does what's expected. Very, very widely stated. Before you look at this one, this is this amazing person I talked to you about. Most petite woman I've ever seen. About 60 years old. Comes in, sits down, she talks for a minute, and it's as if she's filling the entire room. When she talks about how serious education is, how much she demands from her kids. Her kids never underperform because that would be unthinkable, and they don't. And she sounds like George Patton. Right? Now keep that in mind. I do not have rules. I said, what? She says, no, I don't have rules. The first thing I do is get to know every child. I let them get to know me, to see that I'm not a robot. She talks constantly about exposing herself. I excused their weaknesses for the first 3 weeks. Now this person is so disciplined. She's so serious. I thought, that the place would be a prison. She says, I excuse their weaknesses for the first 3 weeks. I let them be third graders. I treat misbehaviors with kindness. Then I begin to stretch them. I build up a parent-like relationship. I set up consequences, but there are a few rules. In my class, for example, there's no rule about going to the restroom. They can go any time they want. The fact is, they never go because they can't stand to miss what's going on in class. They transform control into attractive interaction. Order emerges. Transforming expectations, exchange into positive regard. This is amazing. Remember, there's those core assumptions. Peter Blau wrote a book in the, when was that? 1950s, I think, saying, it's called Exchange Theory. And basically said, life is all about the assumptions we all make about exchanges. I give you something, you give me something. It's about justice. Marriage is a 50-50 proposition. That's a statement of exchange. He says, the reason my theory works is it's in all your heads. That's what you do every day. Alfred Quinn wrote a book saying, the fundamental concept of one word, Blau said, you can reduce all sociology to one word, exchange. Kuhn said, you can reduce all of economics to one word, transaction, and all of law to one word, contract. Contract, transaction, exchange. You give me something, I give you something. As long as we're pleasing each other, there's no conflict. You don't give me the right thing, there's conflict. All right, one of the good teachers. I try to respect them back as long as they warrant it. Fair statement. When a child is disrespectful, I immediately correct them. Whoa, that's pretty strong. Now hold on to your seat. But I do it while modeling complete respect for the child. Screws up. I immediately correct him. While, because he's disrespectful, while maintaining complete respect for him. Wow. That blows me off my chair. But she's not done. Gets better. That's very significant. Much more, I mean, it's obviously funny, but there's much more to that. That's telling you that this person is deeply committed to her calling and her purpose and her objective. And she knows that she has to change this connection right here. And change this structure right here. And the only way to do it is to build complete trust. And the only way to do that is to change the quality of this. And so the people are no longer it's in an instrumental relationship. We're into thou. I see a human being worthy of love. And there are no problem kids. That's not easy. See, I forget to do it at home. It's work. It's self-elevating work. They transform exchange, which Peter Sprouse says is all of the social world, into positive regard. Unconditional positive regard. While saying, give me more. They build trust. Can you imagine if that were your boss? They transform fear. They turn silence into voice. Normal assumption. Some students are afraid to participate. Help them overcome their fear of asking questions. I encourage trial and error learning. It's okay to make mistakes. I call attention to my own mistakes. I focus on ways the students speak to each other. I encourage positive language. They trust me and know I'm not going to embarrass them. I'm a woman of my word. If I tell them I'm going to do something, I do it. They can take it to the bank. Now you see what she's doing? Already changed this. Now She's changing this and this. See, how they talk to each other matters. They have to respect each other. She's clearing this channel right here. They transform fear and silence into confidence and voice. Now I want you to think about this. You're in a group. I ask a question. Normal class, everybody's terrified. The one extrovert says, yeah, me, call me, teacher. And the rest of them are sitting there, oh, I don't want to be embarrassed. Now, think of an alternative where every one of these people feels comfortable and confident. And I ask a question. He raises his hand and he says something really dumb. He says, I think it's X. But no judgment happens. Now she listens to that. She says, well, it's not X, but she says, W. And I said, almost. And he's thinking over there and he says, it's Q. I said, you got it. Fantastic. Where did he get that answer? Got it from him, the dummy over here that said the stupid thing. Because this was a creative process. Do you see that? You see the difference when you have that condition? And you now have a collective mind? They risk expressing what they really think and really think. So now it's not just the teacher that's authentic, he can be authentic. Transforming outliers, resistance into participation. Normal assumption, there will be outliers that cannot be reached. When a question's asked, I have one of the others answer it. So you ask me, the teacher, I have one of the kids answer it. Questions which are directed to the right students in the right sequence. I know she'll step out and take that risk, and I know she thinks, well, I ask her first. Then I ask him, because I know, and then I ask her. And then what happens? The uninvolved students cannot help but piggyback on and give their opinions. In my mind, I build a plan. It is crucial that the outliers be converted, that they buy in. It's crucial to reach the outliers. When the outliers buy in, it becomes enjoyable and easy. Things run smoothly. Everyone cooperates. The EVTATs transform all the outliers into fully engaged participants. My little petite woman says, you know, I had a little girl come into class. Her mother was just sent to prison. She was totally traumatized, living with a grandmother. She came in the first day, climbed under her desk, and began to purr like a kitten. She said, my job's to reach her. And then she describes, tells the story, what she had to do, how it happened. And then she talks about that kid being fully involved. Talks about the light in the kid's eye by the end of the year. The outliers become enormously important. Because when you get the last outlier, you reach the tipping point. And then you get an emergent process. Self-interest into collective effort. Normal assumption, peer pressure hinders progress. Watch any high school class. Social pressure is positive. In our class, we're all working for the common good. My kids walk down the hall in a different way. They're willing to stay in line. There's no need for external pressure. They take personal ownership. They talk endlessly about the kids owning everything. Third graders we're talking about, first graders. My kids would be shocked if someone acted out. Unthinkable. They do what is right because that's what they want to do. They transform self-interest into positive peer pressure. They develop a cultural reinforcement of working for the common good. When that happens, your job changes. Well, again, deep contrast. Let me wrap it up as follows. Value-added scores. Any logical person, any member of any school district or state education department, anywhere who's got a logical mind can figure this out. Here is the test. Here, I got all this garbage around here. Here is the textbook. It's very simple. I get this textbook, I pound it into his head, and he takes the test. Could anything be more logical than that? I change the quality of me. Now, you've seen the bumper stickers. Be the change you want to see in the world. I always say to people, someone has that bump, I say, what's that mean? And then they get all fuzzy. These teachers are Gandhi. Now remember what their goal is? The goal is to convert him from someone who believes he can't change to someone who believes he can change, who adapts successfully to life. That's the goal. These teachers who are laying awake every minute, changing themselves to get better, what are they doing? They live in an adaptive state, constantly changing. Who are they? They're the change they want to see in the world. That's what that bumper sticker means. So they change the quality of self, which changes the quality of the linkages, which causes that emergent positive organizing. And the kids have a unique experience. And the value-added scores go through the roof. That's not logical by normal assumptions. Got to pound that textbook in their head. Now these teachers do those things. But they're operating from a whole nother model. Now, I gave you a warning. What was the warning? Pretty close. And this is not about? All right. Here are the key questions. And we should be talking about state education policy at this moment, right? How do you develop teachers? Question 1. What is the role of positive organizing in your life? Not about teachers. About you today. How can I become a more effective version of myself? What have you learned here today? What thoughts are in your head? What difference can I make today? When you go home tonight, and you sit down at the dinner table, and you think about last night when you said, Junior, what did you learn in school today? And Junior says, nothing. What are you going to do to change that conversation tonight? Not by changing Junior, by changing you. So that when Junior gets up and tells you, Mom's pretty sharp. Dad's great. See, that's pretty close to home. What about when you go back to work in a few minutes? What's the message here? Okay. I'm going to ask you to think about those questions about yourself, and I'm going to ask you to think about this. We're going to take a 10-minute break so that everybody can leave that needs to leave, and there'll be a lot of you. But please, before you leave, write something on that feedback sheet. Janet's back. Janet, stand up for us. Janet's in a purple sweater back there. Give that to Janet as you go out. If you can stay with us, we're going to do something pretty unusual. We're going to try to create positive organizing in this room. I think if that works, you'll have an experience that will further stretch your thinking. So, thank you very much. It's absolutely a joy to be with you. Please answer those questions.